The baby monitor crackled again, Emma's fever-induced whimpers cutting through my exhaustion like broken glass. My daughter had been burning up for 2 days straight, and nothing I tried seemed to help. Outside my tiny apartment window, rain pounded against the glass, the droplets racing each other down the foggy pane. 3 a.m., and I hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a stretch since yesterday. "It's okay, baby girl," I whispered, pressing my cracked lips against her forehead, the heat radiating from her tiny body making my heart race. "Mommy's going to get you better." My hands trembled as I fumbled through my contacts, searching for Dr. Miller's emergency number. The pediatrician had given it to me when Emma was born, telling me to use it only in dire situations. 6 months of single motherhood had taught me to exhaust every other option before making that call, but Emma's glassy eyes and flushed cheeks told me we'd reached that point. I squinted at the screen, my vision blurry from tears and fatigue, and typed quickly, "Dr. Miller, it's Olivia Taylor. Emma's fever won't break, 103.2, and she's barely drinking. I've tried everything. Please help. We can't afford another ER visit, but I'm scared." The message sent with a swoosh, and I collapsed back against the threadbare couch, cradling Emma against my chest. The apartment was so cold, I'd been keeping the heat low to save on bills, but her little body burned against mine like a furnace. My uniform for tomorrow's double shift at the diner hung on the bathroom door, a reminder that I couldn't afford to miss another day of work, couldn't afford another late payment notice on my door. 3 minutes later, my phone vibrated. Address? Just that. One word. Not Dr. Miller's usual compassionate tone, but I was too desperate to question it. Apartment 4B, 1920 Westmoreland Ave, door code 2258. Thank you so much. I hugged Emma closer, humming softly against her damp curls. Her father had walked out when I told him I was pregnant, claiming the baby wasn't his, that I was trying to trap him. The last I'd heard, he was in Arizona with his new girlfriend. No child support, no calls, nothing but the occasional drunken text accusing me of ruining his life. Sometimes I wondered if he was right, if I'd made a terrible mistake keeping Emma, but then she'd wrap her tiny fingers around mine, and I'd realize I'd fight the entire world for her. 20 minutes passed. My eyelids grew heavier, the exhaustion of 72 sleepless hours pulling me under despite my determination to stay awake. Just as I began to drift off, a sharp knock jolted me back to consciousness. "Coming," I called weakly, struggling to my feet with Emma still clutched to my chest. I didn't bother checking the peephole. Dr. Miller had come personally instead of calling, and I was too grateful to question it. I swung the door open, words of thanks already forming on my lips. They died instantly. The man in my doorway wasn't Dr. Miller. He filled the entire frame, at least 6'3" of impeccably tailored black suit and barely contained menace. Behind him stood another man, broader and equally well-dressed, his eyes constantly scanning the hallway. But it was the first man who paralyzed me. Olive-skinned with raven-black hair swept back from a face that belonged in a Renaissance painting. High cheekbones, full lips pressed into a hard line, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb all the light around them. "You're not Dr. Miller," I whispered stupidly, instinctively backing up, clutching Emma tighter. His gaze dropped to my daughter, then back to my face. "No." Just that. One word. Deep and accented. Italian, maybe? And laced with something that made my skin prickle with warning. "I think there's been a mistake," I stammered, trying to close the door. But his hand shot out, palm flat against the wood, stopping it effortlessly. "Your daughter needs medical attention." Not a question. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed danger, but Emma whimpered against my chest, her small body radiating heat. The stranger's eyes softened fractionally at the sound, and I found myself stepping back, allowing him into my apartment. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, taking in everything with one sweeping glance. The stack of past-due bills on the counter, the second-hand furniture, the small Christmas tree I'd put up with its meager collection of ornaments. I saw my life through his eyes and felt a flush of shame creep up my neck. "Give her to me," he said, extending his arms, and panic flared in my chest. "No," I said sharply, backing toward the bathroom. "Who are you? Why are you here?" His jaw tightened. "You texted me, asking for help. I'm here to provide it. Understanding dawned, horrifying and complete. I'd misdialed. This wasn't Dr. Miller. This was... who exactly? The kind of man who showed up at 3 a.m. with security? Who wore suits worth more than my monthly rent? Who carried himself like he owned not just the building but the entire block? I need to take her temperature, he continued, his tone softening slightly. Behind him, the second man had closed the door and taken up position beside it, hands clasped in front, eyes forward, the perfect silent sentinel. I have a thermometer, I said weakly, nodding toward the coffee table where the pink plastic device lay. The stranger, impossibly, smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something devastatingly handsome. I have a doctor waiting downstairs. Let me help you, Olivia. The use of my name sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't given it to him, had I? Just the address. But before I could process this, Emma began to cry in earnest, her tiny face contorting with discomfort, and my resolve crumbled. His name is Dr. Reeves, the man continued. He's very good, very discreet. Something in his tone made me wonder what kind of man needed a discreet doctor on call in the middle of the night. But Emma was getting worse by the minute, and I was out of options. Okay, I whispered. He stepped forward, and I found myself transferring my daughter into his arms. His hands were large but surprisingly gentle as he cradled her, and Emma, my shy, stranger-averse baby, immediately quieted, her fever-bright eyes studying his face with curious intensity. My car is downstairs, he said, already moving toward the door. Bring whatever she needs. It wasn't a request. I grabbed the diaper bag, stuffing in extra clothes and Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit, then followed him out, wondering if I'd completely lost my mind. The second man moved ahead of us, speaking quietly into a device in his ear. By the time we reached the ground floor, the front entrance was flanked by 2 more men in suits, who nodded respectfully as we passed. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet, the December air biting through my thin sweater. A sleek black SUV idled at the curb, its windows tinted to perfect opacity. Another suited man opened the rear door, and the stranger ducked inside with Emma, extending his hand to help me in after them. The interior was warm and smelled of expensive leather. In the dim light, I could see a middle-aged man in the 3rd row, medical bag open on his lap. Vincenzo, the doctor greeted, his tone deferential. What do we have? Vincenzo. The name fit him. Old world, powerful, slightly dangerous. Fever, dehydration, Vincenzo replied, still holding Emma, who had nestled against his expensive suit without concern. Take care of it. Again, not a request. The doctor immediately moved forward, his hands gentle as he examined Emma, murmuring reassurances to me as he worked. I watched, numb with fear and confusion, as he administered medicine and attached a tiny IV to my daughter's arm to rehydrate her. She'll be fine, the doctor assured me after 20 minutes. The fever's already responding to treatment. I'll leave you with medication and instructions. Relief made me lightheaded, tears springing to my eyes. Thank you, I whispered, then turned to Vincenzo, who hadn't taken his eyes off Emma, and thank you. I'm so sorry about the mix-up with the text. I don't know how I can repay you. His dark gaze lifted to mine, unreadable and intense. We'll discuss that later. For now, you both need rest. Before I could respond, the car was moving, pulling smoothly away from my apartment building. Where are we going? I asked, a fresh wave of panic rising in my throat. Somewhere safe, Vincenzo replied. Somewhere warm. I should have protested, should have demanded to be taken home, but exhaustion was a physical weight pressing down on me. Emma was sleeping peacefully now, her breathing even, her small face relaxed for the first time in days. And despite everything, the strange circumstances, the intimidating men, the lingering fear, I found my own eyelids growing heavy, lulled by the smooth motion of the car and the inexplicable sense that for tonight at least, someone else was taking charge. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was Vincenzo's voice, low and determined, speaking to someone on the phone. Find out everything about them, everything, especially about the father. A pause and then, with deadly softness, no one abandons what belongs to me. I should have been terrified by those words. Instead, they followed me into unconsciousness like a dark promise, wrapping around me as securely as the cashmere blanket someone had draped over my shoulders. When I opened my eyes again, the world had changed completely. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a bedroom larger than my entire apartment. I lay in a massive four-poster bed, the sheets silky against my skin, a strange sense of disorientation washing over me. For one terrible moment, I couldn't remember where I was, or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came rushing back. Emma's fever, the misdialed text, the stranger named Vincenzo. Emma. I bolted upright, panic clawing at my throat. "Emma!" I cried out, scrambling to get out of the bed. My feet tangled in the luxurious sheets, sending me tumbling to the plush carpet below. The bedroom door swung open immediately, and Vincenzo stood there, his powerful frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. And in his arms, dressed in what appeared to be brand new pajamas, was my daughter, awake and alert, her cheeks no longer flushed with fever. "She's fine," he said, his deep voice unexpectedly gentle. "Her fever broke around dawn. Dr. Reeves checked her again an hour ago." Relief made my knees weak, and I sank back onto the edge of the bed, tears pricking my eyes. "Thank God," I whispered. Vincenzo crossed the room and, without asking, placed Emma in my arms. She gurgled happily, patting my face with her tiny hands, seemingly completely recovered. I pressed my lips to her forehead, cool and dry, exactly as it should be. "Thank you," I said, looking up at the man who towered over us. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating, and devastatingly handsome, than he had been in the dim light of my apartment. His suit was different today, charcoal gray rather than black, but no less impeccable. "But I really need to get home. I have a shift at—" "You've been given the week off," he interrupted, his tone making it clear this wasn't up for discussion. "Paid leave. Your manager was very understanding." I stared at him, uncomprehending. "You called the diner. How did you even know where I work?" A small, almost predatory smile curved his lips. "I know everything about you now, Olivia Taylor. 24 years old, parents deceased, no siblings, graduated with honors from community college despite working 2 jobs, left by the baby's father, Jackson Reed, when you were 5 months pregnant." His expression darkened. "No child support, no assistance, working 60 hours a week to barely keep afloat." Each word landed like a physical blow. I clutched Emma tighter, suddenly aware of how vulnerable we both were. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Who I am isn't important right now," Vincenzo replied, his dark eyes holding mine with unsettling intensity. "What matters is that your daughter is well and you're safe." Safe. The word echoed strangely in my mind. I'd never felt less safe in my life, sitting in a stranger's bedroom, completely at his mercy. And yet, Emma was better. Someone had dressed her in soft, expensive-looking pajamas printed with tiny yellow ducks. Someone had bathed her, fed her. "Where are my clothes?" I asked, suddenly aware I was wearing silk pajamas that definitely weren't mine. Heat flooded my cheeks at the thought of someone, him, changing me while I slept. "A housekeeper helped you last night," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "Your clothes are being cleaned. There are new ones in the closet if you'd prefer to change now." I glanced toward the door he indicated, a closet likely larger than my bedroom at home. "I appreciate everything you've done for Emma, truly, but this is too much. We need to go home." "Home," he repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "To your unheated apartment, to empty cupboards and past due notices, to working yourself to exhaustion while your child suffers." Shame and anger flared simultaneously in my chest. "That's not fair," I said, my voice catching. "I'm doing the best I can." Something in his expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Yes, you are." He stepped closer, and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "Which is why you deserve better. I don't need charity," I whispered, though every fiber of my being screamed otherwise. "Good, because I'm not offering charity." He reached down, his fingers brushing Emma's cheek with surprising tenderness. She cooed at him, reaching for his hand with her tiny fingers. "I'm offering a solution." Before I could ask what he meant, a soft knock came at the door. "Enter," Vincenzo called, straightening to his full height. A middle-aged woman in a simple black dress appeared, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Breakfast is ready, sir. The high chair has been prepared as requested." "Thank you, Mrs. Abelli. We'll be down shortly." She nodded and withdrew, but not before casting a curious glance my way. I wondered how often Vincenzo brought home strays in need of rescue. "You should eat," he said, turning back to me. "Regain your strength. We'll talk after." The statement left no room for argument. I found myself nodding, rising to my feet with Emma still in my arms. "I'll just change first?" He inclined his head slightly, a gesture both regal and permissive, then turned and left me alone in the vast bedroom. The closet, as I suspected, was obscenely large. Row upon row of women's clothing hung neatly organized by color and style, price tags still attached to most. All exactly my size. I ran my fingers along a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent, wondering why a man like him would have a closet full of women's clothing, ready and waiting. I selected the simplest items I could find, jeans and a soft cream sweater, and dressed quickly, keeping Emma close on the massive bed, surrounded by pillows to prevent her from rolling off. The clothes fit perfectly, the fabric caressing my skin in a way my threadbare wardrobe never did. The hallway outside was long and elegant, the walls adorned with what looked like original artwork. I followed the scent of coffee and pastries. Emma balanced on my hip, her curious eyes taking in everything around us. The dining room was something out of a magazine. A massive table that could seat 20, crystal chandelier overhead, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking what appeared to be a private garden, now dusted with December snow. Vincenzo sat at the head of the table, a newspaper open before him, a steaming cup of espresso at his elbow. He rose when I entered, that old-world courtesy again, indicating the seat to his right where a high chair had been placed. A high chair that looked brand new, along with the collection of baby items arranged nearby. Bottles, formula, tiny jars of organic baby food. "You've been busy," I commented, settling Emma into the chair. She immediately slapped her hands against the tray, delighted with her new perch. "I'm a man who believes in preparation," he replied simply. A server appeared almost instantly, placing a plate before me laden with eggs, pastries, and fresh fruit, along with the largest cup of coffee I'd seen outside of a chain store. My stomach growled audibly, reminding me I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. "Please," Vincenzo gestured toward the food. "Eat." I did, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity, while wanting to devour everything in sight. Emma seemed equally pleased with the tiny portion of pureed fruit the server brought for her, accepting each spoonful with eager noises. "She likes you," I observed as Vincenzo watched Emma with undisguised fascination. "Children and animals," he replied cryptically. "They sense things adults have forgotten." We ate in silence for several minutes, the only sounds Emma's happy babbling and the clink of silverware against fine china. I used the time to study my surroundings more carefully, noting the discreet presence of security personnel positioned near doorways and windows. Through the window, I could see the city skyline in the distance. We were far from my downtown apartment, likely in one of the exclusive neighborhoods on the outskirts I'd only ever driven past. "Your home is beautiful," I said finally, setting down my fork. "One of them," he corrected, his attention returning to me. "I rarely stay in one place for long." "Because of your work?" I ventured, testing the waters. A small, dangerous smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You could say that. And what exactly is your work, Vincenzo?" He considered me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I solve problems," he said finally. "I create order from chaos. I protect what's mine." A chill ran down my spine at the possessive note in his voice. "And what am I? A problem to be solved?" "No, Olivia," he said, my name rolling off his tongue like silk. "You're a solution I never knew I was seeking." Before I could decipher that cryptic statement, Emma began to fuss, tired of confinement. Without thinking, I lifted her from the high chair and settled her on my lap, where she immediately began playing with the napkin, content once more. "She's beautiful," Vincenzo observed. "She has your eyes." "Thank you," I murmured, smoothing Emma's wild curls. "She's everything to me. And her father?" The question came casually, but there was nothing casual about the hard glint that appeared in his eyes. I tensed. "Not in the picture. His choice. Some men don't deserve the gifts they're given," Vincenzo said softly, dangerously. "Tell me about him." Something in his tone made me wary. "There's not much to tell. We dated for 8 months. I got pregnant. He decided parenthood wasn't for him." "He abandoned you both," Vincenzo stated flatly. "No support? No contact?" I shifted uncomfortably. "He texts sometimes when he's drunk. Nothing worth responding to." "I see. Just 2 words, but they contained multitudes. And if he were to return? To claim his rights as a father?" The question made my blood run cold. It was my greatest fear, that Jackson would reappear, not out of love for Emma, but to punish me, to disrupt the fragile stability I'd created. "He won't," I said, more firmly than I felt. "He made it very clear he wants nothing to do with us." Vincenzo nodded slowly, as if filing this information away. "Good." The simple response was layered with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. But before I could question him further, Mrs. Abelli appeared at the doorway. "Sir, Mr. Russo has arrived for your 9 o'clock. Vincenzo checked his watch, a timepiece that probably cost more than my car, and nodded. "Show him to my office. I'll be there momentarily." He turned back to me as Mrs. Abelli withdrew. "I have business to attend to. Mrs. Abelli will show you to the nursery. It's been prepared for Emma. You're welcome to explore the main floor and grounds, but I ask that you stay within the property lines. My security team has orders to ensure your comfort and safety." Orders. Security team. Property lines. The words conjured images of a gilded cage, beautiful but confining. "Are we prisoners here?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His expression darkened. "Never that," he said firmly. "You're my guests. But until I'm certain of your safety, I prefer you remain where I can protect you." "Protect us from what?" Alarm crept into my voice. "We were fine before you texted a stranger in the middle of the night. Giving your address and door code to someone you didn't know," he interrupted, his voice hardening. "Before you opened your door without checking to see who stood on the other side? You weren't fine, Olivia. You were vulnerable in ways you don't even recognize." His words landed like physical blows, each one painfully accurate. I had been desperate and careless, putting both Emma and myself at risk. "Not everyone who answered that text would have helped you," he continued, his voice gentling slightly. "There are wolves in this world, Olivia. I'm merely asking you to stay behind my walls until I'm satisfied the forest is clear." The metaphor wasn't lost on me, nor was the implication that he himself might be the most dangerous wolf of all. But Emma was cooing contentedly in my arms, her fever gone, her cheeks pink with health rather than illness. "How long?" I asked finally. "A few days. A week at most." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with a fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. "Consider it a vacation. When was the last time you had one of those?" "Never," was the truthful answer. Even before Emma, there had always been work or school or caring for my ailing mother in her final days. Vacation was a foreign concept, a luxury for people who inhabited a different world than mine. A world like his. "Fine," I conceded. "1 week? Then we go home." Something like satisfaction flickered across his features. 1 week, he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he believed otherwise. "Mrs. Abelli will see to your needs. I'll join you for dinner this evening." With that, he departed, leaving me alone with Emma and 1,000 unanswered questions. Chief among them, why did a man like him care what happened to a woman like me? Mrs. Abelli reappeared minutes later, her kind face a welcome relief from the intensity of Vincenzo's presence. "If you'll follow me, Ms. Taylor, I'll show you to the nursery. We've prepared it specially for little Emma." "Thank you," I said, rising to follow her. Emma balanced on my hip. Miss Isabelli, how long have you worked for Vincenzo? She led me through a series of elegant hallways, her pace unhurried. Nearly 30 years since he was a boy. I was his nanny before I became his housekeeper. This surprised me. You raised him? A shadow crossed her face. After his mother died, yes. His father was often away on business. What kind of business? I pressed gently. She glanced at me, her expression carefully neutral. I'm sure Mr. Vincenzo will share whatever he wishes you to know. We reached a set of double doors, which she pushed open to reveal the most beautiful nursery imaginable. Soft yellow walls, hand-painted with delicate woodland creatures. A crib that looked handcrafted, with the finest linens. A rocking chair beside a window overlooking the gardens. Shelves filled with books and toys. A changing table stocked with supplies. Everything new. Everything perfect. This is... I couldn't find the words, emotion clogging my throat. When did he do all this? Mr. Vincenzo called ahead last night, Mrs. Isabelli explained, watching as Emma squirmed to be put down, eager to explore her new surroundings. He has resources. When he wants something done, it happens quickly. I set Emma on the plush carpet, watching as she immediately crawled toward a stuffed rabbit nearly as big as she was. And what does he want with us, Mrs. Isabelli? The older woman studied me for a long moment. Mr. Vincenzo has always been alone, she said finally. Even in a crowded room, until now. Mrs. Isabelli's words lingered in my mind as she quietly excused herself, leaving Emma and me alone in the fairy tale nursery. I sank into the rocking chair, watching my daughter explore her new surroundings with gleeful abandon. Torn between gratitude and unease, Mr. Vincenzo has always been alone, even in a crowded room, until now. What did that mean for us? What was I to him? A charity case? A novelty? Something more sinister? The rational part of my brain urged caution, reminded me that normal people didn't bring strangers into their homes and prepare nurseries overnight. But another part, the part that had struggled alone for so long, whispered that perhaps this was simply kindness. Excessive, overwhelming kindness from a man who had the resources to indulge it. Emma's delighted squeal pulled me from my thoughts. She had discovered a basket of toys, each one looking more expensive than everything I'd been able to give her in her 6 months of life. My chest tightened with a complicated mix of emotions. Gratitude that she could experience such luxuries, shame that I couldn't provide them myself, and a creeping sense of obligation to the man who could. I spent the morning in the nursery with Emma, reading to her from the beautiful books on the shelves, playing with toys that were clearly designed for developmental stimulation, and trying not to think about the fact that we were essentially living in a stranger's house with no idea when, or if, we'd be allowed to leave. Around noon, Mrs. Isabelli returned with a tray of lunch, and the news that Vincenzo had been called away on urgent business, but would return for dinner as promised. The news brought both relief and disappointment. I needed answers, but I also dreaded the intensity of his presence. Is there a phone I could use? I asked as she set down the tray. I should let people know I'm okay. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. Who would you call, Ms. Taylor? The question caught me off guard with its gentle accuracy. Who would I call? I had no family left, no close friends. Working 2 jobs and caring for an infant had left little time for socializing. My landlord wouldn't notice my absence until rent was due in 2 weeks. The diner already knew I was on leave. The truth was stark and painful. No one would miss us. I suppose no one, I admitted, the words bitter on my tongue. Mrs. Isabelli's expression softened with understanding. If you need anything at all, there's an intercom by the door. Just press the button and I'll come. After she left, I explored the rest of the upstairs with Emma. Besides the nursery and the bedroom where I'd woken, there was a luxurious bathroom with a tub the size of my kitchen, a sitting room filled with books, and a small gym with top-of-the-line equipment. Every window offered spectacular views of manicured grounds, now blanketed in snow, and each room was impeccably decorated. Beautiful but impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite. There were no personal photographs, no mementos or keepsakes. Nothing to indicate who Vincenzo was beyond his obvious wealth. The few doors that remained closed were locked, silently enforcing the boundaries of our gilded cage. By late afternoon, Emma was napping peacefully in her new crib, and restlessness drove me downstairs. The main floor was even more impressive than the upper level. A grand foyer with marble floors, a living room with soaring ceilings, a formal dining room where we'd had breakfast, and a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Again, everything was beautiful, pristine, and utterly devoid of personality. I was examining a collection of first editions in the library when I heard voices, male, speaking rapidly in Italian, coming from behind a partially open door at the far end of the hallway. Against my better judgment, I moved closer, straining to hear. Non mi interessa quanto costa. Trova questo bastardo. Vincenzo's voice was unmistakable, low and commanding even in another language. Another man responded, his tone deferential but urgent. È scomparso. Nessuna traccia da Phoenix. Phoenix? Vincenzo's voice hardened. Allora vai a Phoenix. Scava più a fondo. My heart stuttered. Phoenix, where Jackson had supposedly moved with his new girlfriend. Were they talking about him? And if so, why? The conversation continued, too rapid for me to catch more than a word or two, but the intensity was unmistakable. Then, abruptly, it ceased. Footsteps approached the door, and I backed away quickly, nearly colliding with a side table. The door swung open fully, revealing Vincenzo and a burly man in a tailored suit. Both stopped short at the sight of me, Vincenzo's expression shifting from irritation to careful neutrality. Olivia, he said, my name a gentle rebuke. I thought you'd be resting. I was exploring, I admitted, heat rising to my cheeks at being caught eavesdropping. Emma's asleep. He nodded to the other man, who departed without a word, then turned his full attention to me. He'd discarded his suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, revealing powerful forearms marked with an intricate tattoo that disappeared beneath the fabric. The casual disarray only enhanced his dangerous appeal. Are you settling in comfortably? He asked, gesturing for me to follow him into what appeared to be his office. I hesitated at the threshold. The room was masculine and imposing. Dark wood, leather furniture, a massive desk with multiple phones and a laptop. The walls were adorned with what looked like antique weapons and maps. It was the first space that felt truly personal, a glimpse of the man behind the wealth. Yes, I said, stepping inside cautiously. Everything is beautiful. Too beautiful for us, honestly. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. Beauty deserves beauty, he said simply, moving to a cabinet and withdrawing a crystal decanter. Would you like a drink? I shook my head. I'm still nursing. Something like approval flickered in his eyes as he poured himself a measure of amber liquid. A dedicated mother. He gestured to one of the leather chairs. Please, sit. I imagine you have questions. I sank into the chair, suddenly aware of how intimidating it was to be alone with him in this space. Just one, really. Why are you helping us? He took the seat opposite mine, swirling the liquor in his glass thoughtfully. Do I need a reason to help a woman and child in distress? Most people would call 911, not bring strangers into their home and buy them a nursery full of designer baby items, I pointed out. He conceded the point with a slight incline of his head. True, but I'm not most people. No, I agreed softly. You're not. You're looking for Emma's father, aren't you? The question landed between us like a physical weight. Vincenzo went very still, his dark eyes assessing me with new interest. You were listening at my door, he said finally. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I heard Phoenix mentioned, I admitted. That's where Jackson went. Vincenzo set his glass down deliberately. And if I were looking for him, would that concern you? I thought about Jackson, his selfishness, his cruelty when I'd told him about the pregnancy, his drunken texts blaming me for trapping him. It would depend on why you were looking. To ensure he never troubles you or Emma again, Vincenzo said, his voice deceptively soft, to make it clear that his responsibilities have been reassigned. A chill ran through me. Reassigned to whom? To me, he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. You can't be serious. You don't even know us. I know enough. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I know you're a fighter, Olivia. I know you've struggled alone far too long. I know your daughter deserves better than a father who abandoned her before she was even born. He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. And I know what it is to be unwanted. The admission caught me off guard, this glimpse of humanity beneath the power and wealth. Mrs. Abelli mentioned your mother died when you were young, I said carefully. His jaw tightened. She did. My father was less than paternal, more interested in his business than his son. He picked up his glass again, draining it in one swallow. It shapes a man, that kind of childhood. I'm sorry, I said softly, genuinely. No child deserves that. No child deserves what Emma's father did either, he replied, his voice hardening. Abandoning his blood, his responsibility. So what? You're offering to… what? Be Emma's father? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. I'm offering to take care of you both, he corrected, permanently. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Why? I whispered. He rose from his chair and moved to the window, his broad back to me. Because when I saw you standing in that doorway, exhausted and desperate but still fighting, something inside me recognized something inside you. He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. I've built an empire, Olivia. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What I don't have is a purpose beyond power, a family. And you think you can just buy one? Buy us? Anger flared, hot and sudden. We're not for sale. That's not what I'm suggesting, he said sharply. I'm offering you a partnership, protection. A future where you don't have to choose between medicine for your child and heat for your apartment. In exchange for what? I demanded, rising to my feet. His eyes darkened, sweeping over me in a way that made my skin tingle. Your presence in my life, your loyalty. He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to back away. Is that so terrible a bargain? To live in comfort? To want for nothing? To raise your daughter with every advantage? It's not that simple, I insisted, though a treacherous part of me wondered if it could be. You're a stranger. I don't know anything about you, about your business, about why you need security teams and private doctors, and… You know I helped when no one else would, he interrupted gently. You know I've treated you and your daughter with nothing but respect. The rest… He shrugged, a graceful motion. The rest you can learn in time. Before I could respond, the baby monitor clipped to my waistband came to life with Emma's fussy cries. I backed toward the door, grateful for the interruption. I need to go to her. Vincenzo nodded. We'll continue this conversation at dinner. 8 o'clock. Again, not a request. I hurried back upstairs, my mind racing. His offer was insane, the kind of proposition that happened in fairy tales or fever dreams, not real life. And yet, as I lifted Emma from her crib, soothing her with gentle bounces, I couldn't help but wonder what it would mean for her future. No more struggling to pay for daycare. No more wondering if we'd have enough for next month's rent. No more working double shifts while missing her first steps, her first words. But at what cost? And who exactly was the man making the offer? I changed and fed Emma, then spent the next hour playing with her on the nursery floor, trying to sort through my tangled thoughts. By the time Mrs. Abelli appeared to inform me that dinner would be served soon and a selection of evening wear had been laid out in my room, I was no closer to a decision. The selection turned out to be a single dress. Midnight blue, floor length, with a modest neckline but an almost entirely backless design. Beside it lay a velvet box, containing a diamond necklace and matching earrings that had to be worth more than everything I'd ever owned combined. The message was clear. Vincenzo was escalating from generous host to something more proprietary. The dress would mark me as his in some way, the jewelry a down payment on the bargain he was proposing. I left both untouched, dressing instead in the jeans and sweater I'd worn earlier. If we were going to have this conversation, I needed to be myself. Not some Cinderella version he was trying to create. Emma was already asleep again, the day's excitement having worn her out. when I made my way downstairs at precisely 8 o'clock. The dining room was transformed from breakfast. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting a warm glow over the elegantly set table. Vincenzo stood by the window, a glass of wine in hand, still in his business attire. His eyes narrowed slightly when he saw me, taking in my deliberate rejection of his gifts, but he said nothing about it. "You look beautiful," he said instead, pulling out my chair, "though I see you declined my offerings." "They were too much," I replied, sitting down, like everything else. He took the seat at the head of the table, his presence somehow filling the entire space. "I've never believed in half measures, Olivia. Clearly," I murmured as servers appeared, presenting the first course, something delicate and French that I couldn't pronounce but that melted on my tongue. We ate in silence for several minutes, the tension between us building with each passing moment. Finally, I set down my fork. "Your offer," I began. "It's impossible." "Few things truly are," he countered. "Improbable, perhaps. Difficult, certainly. But impossible? No." "You don't know me," I insisted. "You can't possibly want—" "I know enough," he interrupted, echoing his words from earlier. "The rest, as I said, will come with time. And if I say no, if I take Emma and walk away tomorrow?" A dangerous stillness settled over Vincenzo at my question. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones and the intensity in his dark eyes. "If you wish to leave tomorrow, I won't stop you," he said finally, his voice deceptively soft. "I'll have you driven back to your apartment. You'll find 6 months' rent paid in advance, a new heating system installed, and a generous amount deposited in your bank account." He took a slow sip of his wine, "Enough to make your life comfortable while you consider my offer more thoroughly." I blinked, taken aback by his response. I'd expected threats, not more generosity, and if I never accept, then the money is yours to keep, with no strings attached. He set his glass down carefully, "Though I think you will accept, eventually." His confidence should have angered me, but there was something almost vulnerable beneath it, as if he genuinely couldn't imagine a scenario where I wouldn't ultimately choose him. "Why?" I asked again. The question that had been haunting me since I'd woken in his home. Why me? Why us? Vincenzo studied me for a long moment before answering. "There are moments, Olivia, that alter the course of a life, moments when something shifts, and nothing that follows can ever be the same." He leaned forward slightly. "When I saw you standing in that doorway, holding your child, exhausted but undefeated, I knew." "Knew what?" I whispered. "That you were meant to be mine." He said it simply, as if stating an indisputable fact. "Both of you." A shiver ran through me at his words, at the absolute conviction behind them. "People aren't possessions, Vincenzo." "No," he agreed. "They're far more valuable, which is why they should be protected, cherished, kept safe from a world that would harm them." His gaze held mine, unwavering. "I can do that for you, Olivia, for Emma. I can give you both the security you deserve." The main course arrived then, perfectly cooked steaks with roasted vegetables, giving me a moment to collect my thoughts. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was madness, that I should grab Emma and run as far as possible from this man and his intensity. But another part, the part that had struggled for so long, whispered that perhaps fate had finally decided to be kind. "Your business," I said carefully after the servers had departed. "What exactly do you do, Vincenzo?" A small, almost predatory smile curved his lips. "I have many business interests: import-export, real estate, private security." "Consulting. That's not an answer. It's the answer I'm prepared to give tonight." He cut into his steak with precise movements. "Suffice it to say, I have resources, influence, the ability to ensure that no harm comes to what's mine." There it was again, that language of ownership that should have repelled me, but instead sent a confusing thrill down my spine. "Are you dangerous?" I asked, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "To those who would threaten my family?" "Yes." He didn't hesitate, didn't soften the truth. "To you and Emma? Never." "Family." The word hung between us, loaded with meaning. We're not your family, Vincenzo. Not yet, he conceded. But you could be. The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of exquisite food and carefully neutral conversation. Vincenzo asked about my childhood, my education, my hopes before life had intervened with responsibilities. I found myself telling him things I rarely shared, about my mother's long illness, about working through community college to earn a degree I never got to use, about the dreams I'd set aside when pregnancy had upended my careful plans. He listened with genuine interest, offering neither pity nor platitudes, simply absorbing my story as if each detail were precious. You wanted to be a nurse, he observed as dessert was served. Why didn't you continue after Emma was born? I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. Have you priced childcare lately? Or nursing school? It was either feed my baby or chase a dream. Not much of a choice. It shouldn't have to be a choice, he said, something like anger flashing in his eyes, if her father had been a man of honor. But he wasn't, I interrupted, suddenly weary of revisiting this painful ground. And wishing doesn't change reality. No, Vincenzo agreed, his expression softening as he regarded me. Action changes reality, Olivia. Decisions change reality. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch so light it could have been imagined. Say yes to me. Let me change your reality. The contact sent electricity through my veins, and I pulled my hand away, disturbed by my body's reaction to this virtual stranger. I need time, I said, rising from the table. This is a lot to process. He stood as well, ever the gentleman. Of course, take all the time you need. Something darkened in his gaze, though I should warn you that I'm not a patient man by nature. Well, I'm not a woman who makes life-altering decisions after 2 days, I countered, summoning what remained of my courage. Good night, Vincenzo. I turned to leave, feeling his eyes on me as I walked away, my legs unsteady beneath me. I'd almost reached the doorway when his voice stopped me. Olivia. Oh, just my name, nothing more. But it froze me in place. I turned back to find him still standing by the table, the candles casting him half in shadow. Check on your daughter, then join me in the library. There's something I want to show you. Again, not a request. I nodded mutely and continued on my way, torn between relief at escaping his presence and a strange, unsettling anticipation of seeing him again. Emma was sleeping peacefully in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in the rhythm of deep slumber. I stood watching her for several minutes, trying to clear my head, to make sense of the surreal situation we'd found ourselves in. 2 days ago, we'd been barely surviving in a cold apartment. Emma sick, me desperate. Now we were in a mansion with a man who spoke of us as if we already belonged to him, offering a life I couldn't even have imagined. What would accepting his offer mean for Emma? For me? And what would refusing cost us? With a sigh, I bent to kiss my daughter's forehead, then made my way back downstairs to the library. The room was dimly lit, a fire crackling in the massive stone fireplace. Vincenzo stood with his back to me, examining something on a side table. Close the door, he said without turning. Somehow sensing my presence, I did as he asked, feeling a strange sense of ceremony in the action, as if I were sealing myself in with him by choice. Come here, he said, finally turning to face me. In the firelight, his features were softer. The harsh lines of power and authority mellowed into something almost gentle. I moved closer, keeping the large leather sofa between us like a barrier. What did you want to show me? In answer, he gestured to the table where several folders lay open. Your life, he said simply. Or rather, what it could be. I approached cautiously and looked down at the documents spread before me. Acceptance letters from nursing schools, financial aid packages, a lease for an apartment in an upscale neighborhood near a prestigious university, enrollment information for a top-rated daycare facility for Emma. I don't understand, I said, leafing through the papers with trembling fingers. Options, Vincenzo replied, watching me closely. If you accept my offer, these are just some of the possibilities available to you. You could return to school, pursue your dream of becoming a nurse. Emma would have the best care, the best education, every advantage. I looked up at him, stunned by the thoroughness of his planning. "You've thought of everything. It's what I do," he said simply. "Anticipate needs, remove obstacles, create opportunities. And what do you get in return?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since his first mention of a partnership. Vincenzo moved around the table until he stood directly before me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and masculine that made my senses swim. "Your presence in my life," he said, his voice dropping to a register that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. "Your loyalty. Your companionship." The implication was clear, and heat rushed to my cheeks. "You want me to be your mistress," I said bluntly. Something like amusement flickered across his features. So American, to be so direct. He shook his head slightly. "No, Olivia. I want you to be my wife." The word landed between us like a physical weight, stealing the breath from my lungs. "Your wife," I repeated, certain I'd misheard him. "That's insane. We barely know each other." "I know enough," he said for the third time that day, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. "The rest will come with time." I stepped back, needing distance from his touch, from the intoxicating pull of his presence. "Marriage isn't a business transaction, Vincenzo." "Isn't it?" he countered, his expression darkening. "In my world, it almost always is. Alliances formed, empires merged, bloodlines continued." He moved closer again, erasing the space I'd put between us. "At least I'm honest about my intentions. I want you. I want your daughter. I want to give you both everything you've been denied." "In exchange for what?" I whispered, my back now against one of the bookshelves, trapped between leather-bound volumes and his imposing frame. "What would being your wife entail exactly?" His eyes traced my face, lingering on my lips in a way that made my pulse quicken traitorously. "Fidelity. Loyalty. Trust." He placed his hands on the shelf on either side of me, caging me in without actually touching me. "In return, you would have my name, my protection, my resources. Emma would have a father who would move heaven and earth for her happiness." "And if I say no?" I asked, struggling to maintain my composure with him so close. "Then, as I said, you leave tomorrow with enough to make your life comfortable while you consider my offer." His voice was gentle, but there was steel beneath it. "But know this, Olivia. Once you walk away, the offer changes. I won't pursue you. I won't beg. You would have to come to me on my terms." Pride and possessiveness radiated from him like heat from the nearby fire. This was a man unaccustomed to rejection, to not getting exactly what he wanted when he wanted it, and yet he was offering me a choice. Constrained, perhaps, but still a choice. "I need time," I said again, ducking under his arm to move away from the bookshelves, away from the dangerous magnetism of his proximity. "Until tomorrow," he conceded. "No longer." I nodded, suddenly desperate to escape the intensity of his gaze, the weight of the decision before me. "Good night, Vincenzo." This time, he let me go without stopping me. I fled upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear, confusion, and, most disturbing of all, temptation. In the safety of my room, I sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. A marriage proposal from a virtual stranger, a future laid out like merchandise in a display case, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. And beneath it all, the nagging suspicion that there was far more to Vincenzo than he was revealing, darker currents beneath the surface of wealth and power. I moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit grounds below, at the security personnel patrolling the perimeter, at the high walls separating this estate from the outside world. A gilded cage, beautiful but confining. Would it feel that way as his wife? Would the luxury compensate for the loss of independence, for binding myself to a man I barely knew? And what about Emma? What kind of life would she have as the daughter of a man like Vincenzo? Protected, privileged, but at what cost? As if summoned by my thoughts, a soft cry came from the baby monitor. I moved quickly to the adjoining nursery, lifting Emma from her crib before her fussing could escalate to full cries. She settled against my chest, her tiny hand clutching at my sweater. "What should we do, sweet girl?" I whispered. Swaying gently in the darkness, "What's the right choice for us?" She made a small, contented sound, already drifting back to sleep in my arms, so trusting, so completely dependent on my decisions. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on me like a physical burden. A soft knock at the nursery door startled me. I turned to find Vincenzo standing in the doorway, his imposing figure silhouetted against the light from the hallway. "Is she all right?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Just stirring," I replied, continuing to rock her gently. She does this sometimes, wakes briefly, then goes right back to sleep. He moved into the room with that fluid grace that seemed at odds with his size, coming to stand beside us. In the dim light from the nightlight, his expression was softer than I'd seen it before, almost vulnerable as he gazed down at Emma. "She's perfect," he said softly. "Yes," I agreed, a lump forming in my throat. "She is." Without asking, he reached out, his large hand gently stroking Emma's curls. To my surprise, she didn't stir at the touch of this stranger, remaining peacefully asleep against my chest. "She trusts you already," I observed, watching his expression. "Children know," he said simply. "They sense things adults have forgotten how to perceive." His hand moved from Emma's head to my cheek, his touch feather light. "Think about my offer, Olivia. Think about what I could give her, what I could give you both." His face was so close to mine now that I could feel his breath on my skin. For one wild moment, I thought he might kiss me, and more disturbingly, that I might let him. Instead, he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Sleep well," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, you decide." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my sleeping daughter and a decision that would alter the course of our lives forever. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in the luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling as moonlight cast patterns across the room, turning Vincenzo's proposal over and over in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, felt the phantom touch of his fingers against my cheek, heard the quiet certainty in his voice when he'd said, "You were meant to be mine." The rational part of me screamed that this was madness. You didn't marry strangers, didn't entrust your child's future to a man you'd known for barely 48 hours, no matter how wealthy or compelling he might be. But another part, the part that had struggled alone for so long, whispered that perhaps this was fate's unexpected mercy. By dawn, I'd made my decision, or thought I had. I rose early, showering in the palatial bathroom before dressing in another of the simple outfits from the closet. Emma was still sleeping peacefully, her tiny face relaxed in slumber. I watched her for several minutes, my heart aching with love and the weight of responsibility. "I'll always do what's best for you," I whispered, gently stroking her cheek. "No matter what." I made my way downstairs, following the now familiar route to the dining room. To my surprise, it was empty. No sign of Vincenzo or breakfast preparations. Instead, Mrs. Abelli appeared from a side door, her kind face creased with concern. "Mr. Vincenzo was called away on urgent business very early this morning," she explained, guiding me instead to a smaller, more intimate breakfast room I hadn't seen before. "He asked that you make yourself comfortable and said he would return by midday." Disappointment mingled with relief at the unexpected reprieve. "Did he say anything else?" Mrs. Abelli hesitated briefly. "Only that he hopes you've made the right decision." The pressure behind those simple words was unmistakable. I nodded, settling into a chair as she served coffee and pastries. "Mrs. Abelli," I began carefully, "how well do you know Vincenzo's business associates?" The older woman's expression became guarded. "Well enough, Ms. Taylor." "And are they dangerous men?" I persisted. She smoothed her apron with practiced hands. "Mr. Vincenzo moves in complicated circles," she said finally. "But he's a man of honor, of his word. Whatever he's promised you, he will deliver." "That's not what I asked," I said gently. Mrs. Abelli sighed, relenting slightly. "The world Mr. Vincenzo inhabits has different rules than the one you know. Different codes, different consequences." She looked at me directly. "But in the 28 years I've known him, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you and your daughter. Before I could press further, Emma's cries came through the baby monitor clipped to my waistband. "Excuse me," I murmured, rising from the table. "Of course," Mrs. Abelli nodded. "When you've settled her, perhaps you'd like to explore the grounds? The snow has stopped and it's quite beautiful in the gardens." The suggestion was tempting. I'd been feeling increasingly claustrophobic within the mansion's walls, no matter how luxurious. "Maybe we will, thank you." I returned upstairs to find Emma fully awake and hungry. After feeding and dressing her in one of the adorable new outfits that had mysteriously appeared in the nursery drawers, I bundled her into a tiny snowsuit and wrapped myself in a cashmere coat I'd found in the closet. The gardens were indeed beautiful, the snow pristine and glittering in the late morning sunlight. Emma cooed with delight at the white wonderland around us, her small face flushed with cold and excitement. We walked slowly along cleared pathways, security personnel maintaining a discreet distance, but always visible at the perimeter. Near a frozen fountain, I paused, bouncing Emma gently as she reached for falling snowflakes. The simple joy on her face made my heart clench. This was what I wanted for her, moments of wonder, of beauty, of innocence preserved. Could Vincenzo's world provide that? Or would the darker elements Mrs. Abelli had alluded to eventually touch her too? A movement at the edge of the property caught my eye. A black SUV passing through the gates, followed by another, then a third. My pulse quickened as they approached the main entrance. Vincenzo was returning, and with him, the moment of decision. I made my way back to the house slowly, deliberately prolonging these final moments of uncertainty. By the time we reached the main entrance, the vehicles were already empty, their occupants presumably inside. Mrs. Abelli met us in the foyer, helping me unwrap Emma from her snowsuit. "Mr. Vincenzo is waiting for you in his office," she said, reaching for Emma. "I'll look after the little one while you speak with him." I hesitated, reluctant to let my daughter go, but Emma went willingly into the housekeeper's arms, apparently already comfortable with her. "It's all right, Mrs. Abelli assured me. "We'll just be in the kitchen making cookies. You can come find us when you're finished." With a deep breath, I made my way to Vincenzo's office, each step feeling heavier than the last. I knocked once on the heavy wooden door. "Enter." His voice was clipped, authoritative. I pushed the door open to find him standing by the window, his back to me, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking rapid Italian, his tone hard and uncompromising. This was a different Vincenzo than the one who had stroked Emma's curls in the nursery last night. This was the businessman, the man of power. He ended the call abruptly when he sensed my presence, turning to face me. He looked tired, I realized with surprise. There were shadows beneath his eyes, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there yesterday. "Olivia," he said, my name softening on his tongue. "I apologize for my absence this morning. There was a situation that required my immediate attention." "Is everything all right?" I asked, genuinely concerned by the strain visible in his features. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It is now." He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. "Please, sit. I imagine you've made your decision." I sank into one of the leather armchairs, gathering my courage. "Before I tell you my answer, I need to know something, Vincenzo. The truth this time." He raised an eyebrow, taking the seat opposite mine. "Ask." "Your business," I said directly. "The security teams, the associates who look more like soldiers than businessmen, the way everyone defers to you with something close to fear." I met his gaze steadily. "If I say yes to you, what exactly am I saying yes to?" Vincenzo was silent for a long moment, studying me with those impenetrable dark eyes. Then, to my surprise, he leaned forward and took my hands in his, the first time he'd initiated such direct, sustained contact. "My father," he began, his voice low and controlled, "built an organization based on fear, on violence, on control. When he died, I inherited his empire, and all the darkness that came with it." His thumbs traced circles on my palms, the gesture almost absent-minded. "For years, I've been working to legitimize our interests, to move away from the old ways into more acceptable ventures." "The old ways," I repeated softly. You're talking about organized crime. The Mafia. He didn't flinch at the accusation. My family has been powerful for generations, yes, and not always on the right side of the law. His grip on my hands tightened slightly. But I am not my father, Olivia. What I build now, I build legally. Real estate, security firms, import-export businesses. Clean money. But the old connections remain, I pressed. The old methods. A shadow passed across his features. Some ties cannot be severed overnight. Some situations still require traditional approaches. He released my hand suddenly, as if afraid his touch might taint me. This is my world, Olivia. I won't pretend it's something it's not. If that changes your answer, it doesn't, I interrupted, the words escaping before I could reconsider them. Vincenzo went still, his eyes searching my face. What are you saying? I took a deep breath, committing myself to the path I'd chosen during the long, sleepless night. I'm saying yes to your offer, but not in the way you proposed. Confusion flickered across his features. Explain. I won't marry you. Not now, not like this, I said firmly, but I will accept your help for Emma's sake. The nursing school, the apartment near campus, the daycare for her. Yes to all of that. His expression darkened. And in return? In return, I'll stay in your life. You'll be part of Emma's life. You'll have the chance to prove that what you feel for us is real, not just some possessive impulse triggered by a wrong number text. I held his gaze steadily. If, after a year, we both feel this is right, truly right, then we can discuss marriage. Vincenzo rose abruptly, moving to stand before the fireplace, his back to me. The rigid line of his shoulders spoke of tightly controlled emotion. You counter my proposal with conditions, he said finally, his voice dangerously soft. Few people have the courage to negotiate with me, Olivia. I'm not negotiating, I corrected, standing as well. I'm offering the only answer I can give that respects both your feelings and my own judgment. I have to protect Emma, and myself. He turned then, and the expression on his face took my breath away. A mixture of frustration, admiration, and something deeper, more vulnerable than I'd yet seen from him. 1 year, he repeated, moving toward me with that predatory grace. 1 year of what exactly? Of getting to know each other, I said, holding my ground as he approached, of building trust, of seeing if this connection between us is real or just circumstance and gratitude. He stopped directly before me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. And during this year, what are we to each other? My heart hammered against my ribs. Friends, I said. Partners in Emma's care. Nothing more until we're both certain. Nothing more, he echoed, his voice dropping to a register that sent heat cascading through me. That will be challenging. The tension between us was palpable, electric. For a moment, I thought he might ignore my conditions entirely and pull me into his arms. Part of me almost hoped he would, a realization that both frightened and thrilled me. Instead, he took a deliberate step back. 1 year, he agreed finally, with one condition of my own. What's that? I asked, both relieved and disappointed by the distance he'd put between us. You live here in my home, he said firmly. You and Emma. Separate wings if you prefer, complete privacy, but under my roof where I can ensure your safety. I hesitated. I need independence, Vincenzo. That's part of this. Independence doesn't mean vulnerability, he countered. My enemies, and yes, I still have them, would see you as a way to hurt me the moment they learned of your importance. Here, you're protected. At school, you'll have security, discreet, but present. The reality of what it meant to be connected to a man like him settled over me like a weight. This is what it would always be like, isn't it? Security details, constant vigilance. For now, he conceded. Until certain matters are fully resolved. But yes, protection would always be a consideration. His expression softened slightly. Is that so terrible? To know that no harm could ever come to you or Emma? Put that way, it was hard to argue against. All right, I agreed reluctantly. We'll stay here, but I need my own space, my own life beyond these walls. Done, he said immediately, as if afraid I might change my mind. The East Wing is yours. The staff will answer to you directly for anything you need. Your school schedule is yours to determine. Come and go as you please. With security, of course. The speed of his agreement surprised me. You're not going to argue more? Something like amusement flickered across his features. Olivia, you've just agreed to live under my roof for a year. To give me daily access to you and Emma, to allow me to prove myself worthy of you both. His voice dropped lower. I may be demanding, but I'm not a fool. I know when I've been given a gift. The sincerity in his tone made my throat tighten unexpectedly. Before I could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught our attention. Emma's delighted squeals and Mrs. Abelli's gentle laughter. The door opened without a knock, and the housekeeper appeared with Emma in her arms, the baby's face smeared with what looked like chocolate cookie dough. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Abelli began, but she was asking for her mama and— It's fine, Vincenzo interrupted, his severe expression melting into something softer as he gazed at Emma. We were just finishing our discussion. I moved to take Emma, who reached for me with sticky hands, babbling happily. As I settled her on my hip, I looked back at Vincenzo. So we have an agreement? 1 year. Friends and co-parents only. Then we decide. We have an agreement, he confirmed, his dark eyes intense as they moved from Emma's face to mine. Though I should warn you, Olivia, I don't intend to lose. Mrs. Abelli discreetly withdrew, leaving the three of us alone in the office. Emma, oblivious to the significance of the moment, reached out a chocolate-covered hand toward Vincenzo. To my surprise, he didn't hesitate, stepping forward to let her tiny fingers grasp his much larger one. Hello, little one, he murmured, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. It seems we're going to be family after all. Not yet, I reminded him softly. Maybe someday. He looked up from Emma to me, and the expression in his eyes made my breath catch. Possession mingled with something that looked remarkably like love. Someday soon, he corrected, his free hand coming up to touch my cheek with exquisite gentleness. I'm a patient man when the prize is worth waiting for. As Emma babbled happily between us, her tiny hand still clutching Vincenzo's finger, I felt something settle in my chest. Not certainty. Not yet. But possibility. The possibility of a future I'd never dared imagine, with a man as dangerous as he was compelling. 1 year to discover if the connection that had formed between us in the strangest of circumstances could grow into something real and lasting. 1 year to learn if the darkly powerful man who had claimed us as his own could truly become the husband and father we needed. 1 year that somehow, I already suspected, would change everything. As if reading my thoughts, Vincenzo smiled, a real smile that transformed his severe features and reached his eyes. Welcome home, Olivia, he said softly. Both of you. And despite all my reservations, all my carefully constructed conditions, I found myself smiling back. Thank you for answering a wrong number, I whispered. His hand moved from my cheek to the back of my neck, warm and strong, drawing me fractionally closer. It was the most right-wrong number of my life. With Emma between us, chocolate-covered and giggling, and Vincenzo's dark eyes promising a future I could barely comprehend, I felt, for the first time in longer than I could remember, truly safe. Not just because of his wealth or his power, but because of the fierce protectiveness I saw when he looked at us, the determination to keep what he considered his from all harm. 1 year. It would be complicated, challenging, probably dangerous at times. But as Emma reached her other hand toward me, connecting the three of us in a circle, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes the wrong number leads to exactly the right destination.